Hello, and welcome to the third episode of Dark Academia Queen. Okay, so I have to admit this. I have been obsessed with watching Bridgerton. So I watched it one time before, and I couldn't get past season one. So I decided I'm just gonna go back, give it a second shot. So glad I could get past season one. I will say, watching season one, the plot was definitely worth watching. If you know, you know. Not gonna lie, I'm a woman after all. Um, but it's like, oh my gosh, so I'm gonna talk about some spoilers here for a second. Um, Especially like Eloise and Penelope have become my favorite characters. I love Eloise's independentness and Penelope, like I love Penelope overall though. Like I don't know what it is about her character, but it's like I think I can relate to her I relate to Penelope a lot, so I want to say here's to all the Penelopes out there. And she gets her love with Colin. That makes me so happy. I know it sounds like some you're probably gonna judge me, but I am. But can we talk about like when Queen Charlotte comes visit to the wedding breakfast of Penelope and Colin? She says anybody who is not a Bridgerton walks out. How? Benedict was just not there to begin with. We know what he was doing, right? Yeah, we know exactly what he was doing. um, not gonna lie. Uh, yeah, he's like, I don't want to deal with all of this, but he was. But anyway, those are my spoilers. I do feel like Francesca and John were a perfect match because one, Francesca was just so she's so reserved and he's just a perfect match for her. Um, I haven't read the books from what I read though when he dies 2 years later. Yeah, which don't get me started on having to wait 2 years just to watch the fourth season. Don't get me started on that one. But anyway, I want to talk about the Regency era. Before I continue, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Okay, but but the Regency era, what exactly is it? Why is this important? Like, what is the reality and how, like, surrounding the Bridgertons is when I talk about that. Well, in reality, this is an era of British history that is commonly described as the years between circa 1795 and 1837. Although the official regency for which it is named only spanned the years 1811 to 1820, King George III first suffered hindering illness of late 1780s and relapsed into his final mental illness in 1810. The Regency era in the late 1780s and so the Regency Act of 1811 made his eldest son George Prince of Wales and was appointed Prince Regent to discharge royal functions. When George III died in 1820, the Prince Regent succeeded him as George IV. Now, in terms of periodization, which basically means that the longer the lifespan is roughly the final years of the Georgian era, which a final third of the Georgian era, which was 1714 to 1837. And this would encompass the last 25-ish years of George III's reign, which would include the official regency and complete and the complete reigns of both King George IV and his brother and his successor William IV, and it ends with the accession of Queen Victoria in June in 1837, and was followed by Victorian era from 1837 to 1901. So yes, I'm going to give some brief history because I think it's important to understand the Regency era to begin with. And honestly, history just interests me. Come on, who doesn't love this kind of stuff, right? And if you haven't clicked on here, you know you're watching it. You want to know the reality, like of what dating was really like and all of that. And I know but here we are. And although the Regency era is often remembered as a period of refinement and culture, This was reserved for the wealthy few, especially those in the Prince Regent's own social circle. Now, the masses and poverty was rampant as the population began to concentrate due to labor and industrial migrations. City dwellers lived increasingly in larger slums, and a state of affairs severely aggravated the combined impact of war, economic collapse, mass unemployment, bad harvest in 1816, that was also known the year without a summer, and an ongoing population boom. And political response to the crisis included the Corn Laws, the Peterloo Massacre, the Representation of the People Act in 1832, which was led by William Wilberforce, and there was increasing support for abolitionist cause during the Regency era, culminating in the passage of the Slave Act in 1807 and the Abolition Act in 1833. Now, the longer lifespan recognizes the wider social and cultural aspects of the Regency era. Let's go ahead and clarify that. It is also characterized by distinctive fashion, architecture, style, and periods. The first 20 years to 1815 were overshadowed by Napoleonic Wars, and throughout the whole period, the Industrial Revolution gathered pace and achieved significant progress by the coming of the railways and the growth of the factory system. The Regency era did overlap with the Romanticism and many of the major artists, musicians, novelists, poets of the Romantic movement, which was prominent in the Regency figures, such as Jane Austen, William Blake, Lord Byron, um, John Constable, John Keats, John Nash, Anne Radcliffe, Walter Scott, Mary Shelley, Percy B. Shelley, J.M.W. Turner, and William Wordsworth. Personally, one of my favorites, not gonna lie. But think about it, Jane Austen though, like I remember it was one line. I can't remember who said it, but it was one of the sisters, and she's talking about marriage and how don't talk about how marriage is like a business proposition for me. So let's go ahead. And keep in mind, women didn't really have a lot of rights at this time either. But back to King George III. He became King of Great Britain on October 25th, 1760, when he was 22, succeeding his grandfather George II. George III had himself been the subject of legislation to provide regency when Parliament passed a minority of the successor to the Crown Act in 1751, following the death of his father Frederick, Prince of Wales, on March 31st, 1751. He became heir apparent at the age of 12, and he would have succeeded as a minor if his grandfather had died before June 4th of 1756. On his 18th birthday, as a contingency, the act provided for his mom, Augusta, Dowager Princess of Wales, to be appointed regent and discharge most but all royal functions. In 1761, George III would marry Princess Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strauss, and over the following years they had 15 children. Now, I do know it's supposed to be exaggerated, and I know I'm going to receive a lot of hate for this, but on the Queen Charlotte and everything in Bridgerton, like, I believe, though, like, they did go a little bit overboard with it, but I love the show, so I'm not going to complain on that, and everything. But anyway, the real Charlotte here, um, of was they had 15 kids over their in their marriage, 9 sons, 6 daughters. The eldest was Prince George, who was born August 12th, 1762, as heir apparent. He was named Prince of Wales soon after his birth, and by 1765, 3 infant children led the order of succession, and Parliament again passed the Regency Act as contingency. In the minority of the era, the Crown Act in 1765, which provided Queen Charlotte or Princess Augusta to act as regent if necessary. George III had long episodes of mental illness in the summer of 1788, and Parliament proposed a Regency Bill in 1789, which was passed by the House of Commons before the House of Lords could debate it. The king recovered and the bill was withdrawn. Had it been passed into law, the Prince of Wales would have become regent in 1789. Now, the king's health continued to be a matter of concern. Whenever he was a sound mind, he opposed any moves of implement of the Regency Act. Finally, following the death on November 2nd, 1810, of the youngest daughter, Princess Amelia, he became permanently insane. Parliament passed the care of the king during his illness, etc. in Act 1811, commonly known as the Regency Act of 1811, and the king was suspended from his duties as head of the state, and the Prince of Wales assumed office as Prince Regent on February 5th, 1811. At first, Parliament restricted some of the regent's powers, but the constraints expired. Um, 1 year after the passage of the act, and the regency ended when George III died January 29th, 1820, and the Prince Regent succeeded as George IV. After George IV died in 1830, a further Regency Act was passed by Parliament. George IV was succeeded by his brother William IV, his wife Queen Adelaide, I love that name, by the way, um, was 37, and there was no surviving legitimate children. The representative was Princess Victoria of Kent, age 11, and a new act provided that her mother, Victoria, Dowager Princess of Kent, to become regent in the event of William's death before May 24th, 1837. The young Victoria's 18th birthday, the act made allowance for have made allowance for Adelaide having another child before or after William's death, and if the latter scenario had arisen. Victoria would have become queen only temporarily until the new monarch was born. Adelaide had no more children, and as it happened, William died June 20th, 1837, just 4 weeks before Victoria was 18. Now, here are some perceptions. And officially, Regency would begin February 5th, 1811. At the end on and ended on January 29th, 1820. But the Regency era, as such, was generally perceived as being much longer. And the term commonly, though loosely applied to the period from circa 1795 until the accession of Queen Victoria in 1837. And the Regency era is a subperiod that was of the longer Georgian era, both of which was followed by the Victorian era, in the latter term of the com- contemporary contemporaneous usage throughout some of the history, give it the earlier start point, typically with the enactment of the Queen's Reform Act on June 7, 1832. Now, what are some of the social, economics, and political counterpoints? Well, the Prince Regent himself was one of the leading patrons of the arts and architecture. He ordered the costly building and refurbishing of the exotic Brighton Pavilion in the ornate Carlton House and many public works and architecture. They also required considerable expense from neither the regent himself nor the HM Treasury could afford. And the regent's extravagance was pursued at the expense of the common people. So while the Regency is noted for the elegance and achievements in the time of fine arts, architecture, there was a concurrent need for social and political and economic change. The country was enveloped in the Napoleonic Wars until 1815, and the conflict heavily impacted the commerce at home and internationally, and there was mass unemployment and, in 1816, an exceptionally bad harvest. In addition, the country underwent a population boom, and the combination of these factors resulted in rampant poverty. Apart from the national unity led by William Grenville from February 1806 to March 1807, all governments from December 1783 and November 1830 were formed and led by Tories, and their response to the national crisis included the Peterloo Massacre in 1819, the various Corn Laws, the Whig government of Earl Grey passed the Great Reform Act in 1832, um, and essentially England during the Regency era was a stratified society in which the political powers and influence lay hands in the landed class. Their fashionable locals were worlds apart from slums, and the majority of the people existed. The slum districts were known as work was rookeries, a notorious example of being St. Giles's in London, and there were places where alcoholism, gambling, prostitution, thievery, and violence prevailed. The population boom, comprising an increase of just under a million in 1801 and a quarter million in 1820, heightened the crisis. Robert Southey drew a comparison between the squalors and the alums and the Regency Circle. Now, let's talk about the arts and the architecture. Most famous one is the Regent era, um, the Regent's Park in London Zoo. Um, those are some of the most famous. And now let's talk literature now. Jane Austen, we all know it. Little Women, and all of that. Come on. Who doesn't miss that? Like, I so want to do like that whole run through the bath and park it run through bath. Like that's all on this reel one time. But anyway. um but Jane Austen, Lord Byron, Walter Scott, and others were prominent writers of this era. In this time period, it also produced some of the 19th century's most prolific writers, such as Charles Dickens, Charlotte Bronte. Oh my gosh, she's so good. Benjamin Disraeli. And the music was like wealthy households staged their own music events by relying on family members who could sing and play an instrument. For the vast majority of people, street performance provided sole access. However, the upper middle class enjoyed such as Beethoven, Felix Mendelssohn's, and everything. Now, let's talk about paintings. Like, and the most prominent painting of the Regency era was John Constable and J.M.W. Turner. And notable portrait painters include Thomas Lawrence, Morton Archer Shea, both presidents of the Royal Academy and the National Gallery that was established in 1824. So, now, Interior Theatre Royal Drury Line was also done in 1808. Now, here's some popular media from the Regency era. Ackerman's Repository, The Gentleman's Magazine, The Times, The Observer, Colbert's Weekly Political Register, La Belle Assembly, Science and Technology. Balls was also one of the most very popular things. And I like watching like period pieces and like getting a glimpse into like what life was like in that time period. And balls is something I noticed there's a lot of. There was a bare knuckle boxing, which is something you will see in Bridgerton season one. I noticed off the bat. Also, I did notice more than just a plot. I have. But yes. Cricket was also very popular in the cricket was also becoming one of those very popular things. Football, not American football. This was like we call it soccer here in America, but it's football over in Europe. Horse racing. What are some events in the Regency era that are kind of important? Well, George Augustus Frederick began his 9-year tenure as regent and became known as the Prince Regent in 1811. In 1812, the Prime Minister, Spencer Perceval, was assassinated in the House of Commons. In 1830, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen was published. In I just realized I've been saying Little Women in the wrong things, but oh well. But like Jane Austen, she published Pride and Prejudice. Yes. Sorry, Louisa May Alcott. I did not real. I was getting those two mixed up. But if it helps, it does kind of refer back to the same thing. Sorry about the whole mix up, y'all. Please don't be mad at me. But also, yeah, there was the Wellington at the Battle of Waterloo. Napoleon the First of France was defeated in 1815. Now, here are some notable people from that area. I'm not going to name all of them, but Jane Austen, Carolina Brunswick, Lady Georgina Cavendish, Princess Charlotte Augusta of Wales, Princess Charlotte of Wales by Daw. Um, but yeah, there was also some period things that became culture. One is like the clutch. We all have a clutch. I still don't use mine though. I don't even use mine that often and everything. But fashion really was really becoming a thing. But the clutch bag was really becoming popular as well. Taste was also like jury costume and all of that. But yes. So what was dating like in the Regency era? Well, if you hung with me this long, here are what the rules for the dating in the Regency era was. All right. Um, it was making a match. It was also when and where and how couples could meet. It was if it progressed or didn't. They would decline or dance with them. They needed chaperones on dates. There was guidelines for even conversations. There was love letters being exchanged. Courtship gifts would convey devotion. The length of the courtship and how it might end. So many like interesting things like when it comes to the Regency era. It is one of my favorite periods of history. I am not gonna lie to you. But if you hung with me this long, thank you guys. Y'all have a great day. Let me know what I should be talking about next. I do plan on eventually talking about the Victorian era, my all-time favorite period of history. I really want to talk about like so many things. I'm like just fascinated with that era. I don't know what it is, but I'll see y'all next time.